Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West. We're going to continue doing what we've been doing since week 50 here on Third Age Thursdays, and that's looking at the poetry and songs from the Lord of the Rings. Now, last week we finally got to catch up to the Rohirric, and were moved by the powerful and poignant alliterative verse from Dark Dunharrow. Today, we get two, quite possibly three more incredible examples of Rohirric alliterative verse, starting with a short verse cried out by Éomer. In the middle of the chaos of the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, as the battle has gone back and forth with each side believing victory was close at hand, the brand new King of the Mark saw the black sails approaching the Harland. Then we read, "Now he looked to the river, and hope died in his heart, and the wind that he had blessed he now called accursed. But the hosts of Mordor were enheartened, and filled with a new lust and fury, they came yelling to the onset. Stern now was Éomer's mood, and his mind clear again. He let blow the horns to rally all men to his banner that could come thither, for he thought to make a great shield wall at the last, and stand, and fight there on foot till all fell, and do deeds of song on the fields of Pelennor, though no man should be left in the west to remember the last King of the Mark. So he rode to a green hillock, and there set his banner, and the white horse ran rippling in the wind. Out of doubt, out of dark to the day's rising, I came singing in the sun, sword unsheathing. To hope's end I rode, to heart's breaking, now for wrath, now for ruin, and a red nightfall." These staves he spoke, yet he laughed as he said them. For once more lust of battle was on him, and he was still unscathed, and he was young, and he was king, the lord of a fell people. And lo, even as he laughed at despair, he looked out again on the black ships, and he lifted up his sword to defy them. Now, fortunately, those black ships proved to be the arrival of Aragorn and the Eucatastrophe, but this was a moment where Éomer was convinced his death was approaching. This was the last stand, characterized by grim laughter, the lust for battle, and a fierce defiance. But I want to compare it to another Rohirric verse from much later, but one that directly calls back to this moment. "Then the riders of the king's house upon white horses rode round about the barrow, and sang together a song of Theoden Thengel's son, that Gleoina his minstrel made, and he made no other song after. The slow voices of the riders stirred the hearts even of those who did not know the speech of that people. But the words of the song brought a light to the eyes of the folk of the Mark, as they heard again afar the thunder of the hooves of the north, and the voice of Eorl crying above the battle upon the field of Celebrant. And the tale of the kings rolled on, and the horn of Helm was loud in the mountains, until darkness came, and King Theoden arose and rode through the shadow to the fire, and died in splendor, even as the sun, returning beyond hope, gleamed upon Mindalluin in the morning. Out of doubt, out of dark to the day's rising, he rode singing in the sun, sword unsheathing. Hope he rekindled, and in hope ended. Over death, over dread, over doom lifted, out of loss, out of life, unto long glory." Now, it's clear that Gleoina wrote a lot more than just these 5 lines. I mean, we read that it's basically covering all of the history from Eorl in the field of Celebrant through Helm all the way down to Theoden. Skull and Hammond point out that these lines are meant clearly to be only a small part of an epic whole, but Tolkien wrote no more. Still, look at those words and compare them to the verse that we just read from Éomer on the battlefield. The same first line precisely, and the second line's very much the same. I came singing in the sun, sword unsheathing, versus he rode singing in the sun, sword unsheathing. But even the third lines echo one another. To hope's end I rode, and to heart's breaking, versus hope he rekindled, and in hope ended. Beautiful and poignant. Skull and Hammond cite Tom Shippey from his alliterative verse by Tolkien as saying that the best of Tolkien's alliterative verse is in The Lord of the Rings, in particular the 3 epitaph poems. From Dark Dunharrow, which we looked at last week, Theoden's funeral dirge, and one other, which we'll finally look at now after its prose introduction. Aragorn and Eomer and Imrahil rode back towards the gate of the city, and they were now weary beyond joy or sorrow. These three were unscathed, for such was their fortune, and the skill and might of their arms, and few indeed had dared to abide them or look on their faces in the hour of their wrath. But many others were hurt or maimed or dead upon the field. The axes hewed Forlong as he fought alone and unhorsed, and both Duilin of Morthond and his brother were trampled to death when they assailed the Mumakil, leading their bowmen close to shoot at the eyes of the monsters. Neither Hirluin the Fair would return to Pinnathgeddin, nor Grimbold to Grimslade, nor Halbarad to the Northland's dour-handed ranger. No few had fallen, renowned or nameless, captain or soldier, for it was a great battle, and the full count of it no tale is told. So long afterward, a maker in Rohan said in his song of the mounds of Mundburg, "We heard of the horns in the hills ringing, the swords shining in the south kingdom. Steeds went striding to the stoning land as wind in the morning. War was kindled. There Theoden fell, Thingling mighty, to his golden halls and green pastures in the northern fields, never returning. High lord of the host, Harding and Guthlaf, Dunher and Deirwina, doughty Grimbold, Herefara and Herebrand, Horn and Fastred, fought and fell there in a far country. In the mounds of Mundburg under mould they lie, with their league fellows, lords of Gondor. Neither Hirluin the Fair to the hills by the sea, nor Forlong the Old to the flowering vales ever, to Arnach, to his own country, returned in triumph. Nor the tall bowmen Derufin and Duilin to their dark waters, meres of Morthond under mountain shadows. Death in the morning, and at day's ending, lords took and lowly, long now they sleep under grass in Gondor by the great river. Grey now as tears, gleaming silver, red then it rolled, roaring water, foam dyed with blood, flamed at sunset, as beacons mountains burned at evening, red fell the dew in Ramas Echor." Now, since this is an elegy written by a Rohirric poet, the warriors that were listed initially, names like Dunhir and Deirwina, Horn and Fastred, they're all from the Rohirrim, but the men of Gondor are named alongside them. And the names might sound familiar because they were all named in that list of reinforcements arriving from the southern fiefs of Gondor in the chapter Minas Tirith. Skull and Hammond point out, it is a sign of the bond between the two peoples that the riders of Rohan and the great of Gondor who fell on the Pelennor were buried together, league fellows even in death. So it was also for brothers in arms in Tolkien's world when We Heard in the Hills was written. And while this next one is way too short to stand on its own for a Third Age Thursday, there's another short alliterative verse connected to these events that I want to briefly read before wrapping up. And it's just 3 short lines that Eomer speaks after Theoden dies. "Mourn not over much, mighty was the fallen, meet was his ending. When his mound is raised, women then shall weep. War now calls us." There's something so deeply powerful, to me at least, in this ancient style of verse. It's stirring and moving, and it transports me to a mead hall listening to a Rohirric minstrel sing of the deeds of the valiant men and women of that people. I hope you've enjoyed these last 2 weeks, as we will be moving away from Rohan and alliterative verse next week and for the rest of the series. For now, though, folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Be sure to come back tomorrow as we go back to the very beginning with First Age Fridays. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus episode every week, and more. Podcast listeners, you know the drill. Subscribe in your podcast apps. On YouTube, hit the subscribe button, get all the PPP productions, including my streaming show, and be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.